Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.
Everybody loves the Blues. I do as well. They're great for the bottom line. They're great for morale. But the reality is that 60 some odd million bonds out to be $108 million. We obligated ourselves for 30 years to pay for upgrades to a facility that we don't own. It's a real breakdown in trust. We know that we have communities that do not trust our police department. And you are calling for an emergency and you get a recording, it's absolutely devastating. Fixing 911 will be a key strategy for rebuilding that trust.
Would you support regional governance for this airport that's currently owned and run by St. Louis City?
I would support looking at it, absolutely. I do not have a predetermined solution in mind, and nor should I, nor should anyone.
I'm Sarah Fensky. This is St. Louis on the Air. Today is day 3 of our 4-day series of interviews with the mayoral candidates running in St. Louis City's March 2nd primary. And today, our guest is Cara Spencer. She is the city's 20th Ward Alderwoman. She got that job 6 years ago by toppling a 20-year incumbent. She aims to pull a similar upset next month. The 4-person race includes 2 other candidates who've won multiple citywide elections. But Spencer is, as they say, in it to win it. And she joins us today to discuss what she'd do if elected mayor. So, Alderwoman Cara Spencer, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
So I think it's fair to say citywide, you're the least well-known of the 3 Democrats in this race. And Election Day is coming up so soon. Does it feel like a real battle just to get people to pay attention to the fact that they have this election coming up?
You're right. I am the only candidate in this election who has not run for this seat before. So while my name is new, I think that's a real opportunity as people are looking for a change. But you're right. It has been a bit of a challenge to get people to focus on local government issues, especially as we've seen so many disasters on the national level. But people really are turning in and digging into the mayor's race here.
So we're also doing this with Prop D in place. This makes these elections nonpartisan. It also means approval voting. People can vote for as many candidates as they want, which is something totally different. With the idea that you can vote for anyone you approve of, do you think being lesser known has advantages? You maybe don't have all the baggage that some of your opponents might have.
That's right. I think what we're seeing is really people are looking for a change in government, certainly on the local level. And, the approval style really favors somebody like me who is a consensus builder, who, gets the approval of a wide range of people. And we're seeing that bear out in what we're hearing at the doors, on the phones, and by talking to people. And so I think that this is an exciting opportunity to talk about policies and issues and what we will do instead of just the sort of personality-based political discussion that often takes place.
So let's talk about some of those policies. I would say that you're best known for your fight against airport privatization. What made stopping that plan such a big deal to you?
Oh my gosh. Well, I was interested in the proposal from the beginning, which was, 6 years ago now, almost 5 years ago. We are sitting here smack in the middle of the nation on some of the most incredible logistical assets in the nation. And our airport's one of them. We have not one, but 2 international airports here in the St. Louis region, bisected by the nation's largest river. And we have the 2nd largest inland port in the nation, the most efficiently functioning port, by the way, in the nation. So I view our airport and the future of it not just as an asset that belongs to the city, but really something that serves a very important, vital role in what could be incredibly booming industry and logistics and other things. We have got to be serious about how we take a look at that. And I did not view the approach that we took from the onset to be one that was future minded, in that it was not inclusive of the business community and the regional leadership outside of St. Louis City that could really drive a solution in the best interest of the residents as a whole.
So the idea of leasing this airport to a nonprofit or to a for-profit entity, this appears to be dead for now. I never want to say things are permanently dead in St. Louis. It doesn't seem to be how ideas work in this town. But that doesn't seem to be happening. Do you have a plan to help bring in more traffic to this airport and get it up to where it needs to be?
Sure. Well, Sarah, I would not say that the plan looks dead to me. If contributions on the political side of things is any indication of future efforts or future desired efforts, I would say that the proposal is certainly very much alive, and that's worrisome.
You think they gave up on Mayor Cruson? They didn't give up on trying to lease this airport?
Well, they're still making very significant contributions in this mayor's race, as a matter of fact, and I think that is a real cause for concern.
And when you say they, people who were behind this effort, or the people who wanted to potentially bid on this, these people?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, the folks involved. Look, your question was really about what I will do if elected mayor, and first and foremost, bringing stakeholders, all of the stakeholders involved to the table. And some of those I've already mentioned: our business community, the regional leadership, the state of Missouri. These are folks that should be involved in the discussion about what's next for Lambert. Our current airport director, Director Rhonda Homnebergy, has done an excellent job of making that airport finally competitive on the national and international level. And she's done that by increasing traffic significantly. And that has reduced the cost of doing business at Lambert by about 50% in just the last decade, which is quite incredible. So we have increased capacity, but now the real question is, what do we do with all the unused land? How do we expand the offerings there to increase what St. Louisans have access to as far as economic activity and just sheer travel, and that is imperative to the discussion. So what I will do is be bringing those stakeholders to the table to talk about how we can leverage the business community and how we can leverage those things that we already have in the works so that we can serve a brighter future. But we need to have the investments lined up and we need to have all partners in place. And this can't be handled in a silo like we saw it happen over the last several years.
Would you support regional governance for this airport that's currently owned and run by St. Louis City?
I would support looking at it, absolutely. I do not have a predetermined solution in mind, and nor should anyone running for mayor right now. Because we have not done a full evaluation of the asset, we haven't even taken a look at what the risks associated of going down different paths may be. And that was a real failure of the last not one, but two efforts to privatize the airport. We have to remember it wasn't just Mayor Cruson who was looking at that. After that plan failed, the president of the board took up that proposal and tried to ram it through the Board of Aldermen at the end of the summer. So I think it's important to really be very judicious and very comprehensive in looking at what we can and should be doing, but certainly bringing the regional leadership to the table and certainly bringing the business community into the discussion to talk about how that airport can better serve all of us, including the state of Missouri.
So we've been talking a lot about the airport. I think it's fair to say the big topic in this race is crime. You've got a 10-point plan for this. We don't want to go through all 10 points. If people want more, they can find that on your website. But you lead with something called Focus Deterrence. Tell us what this is about.
Focus Deterrence is a data-driven program. It's worked in cities across the nation to help really address violence. Most recently in Oakland, it was very successful in dropping their homicide rate by about 50% in just 5 years. What it does is it focuses on the very small number of people, individuals at high risk for being involved in violent crime. We have been focusing our efforts geographically here in those rectangle triangles, and that's had limited success. We're sweeping everybody in a neighborhood under the same rug. And, living and representing that South Side Triangle, I can tell you that the vast majority of people that live here are law-abiding citizens. So Focus Deterrence shifts that focus on the very, very small number of people, connects them with resources that they can use to turn their lives around, and really focuses law enforcement when they don't. It's very, very successful, and it really helps target an approach to violence.
So this would be somewhat like Hayden's Rectangle, named for our current chief, Police Chief John Hayden, in that it would be targeting some areas that are problems. But rather than target neighborhoods like the one that you represent, it would be targeting the people within them. What kind of... Sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's actually, Sarah, very different from the triangle approach. I mean, that is... The triangle approach is really focusing policing. And what focused deterrence does, it brings partners to the table, and it helps connect folk to jobs, and it helps connect those individuals to the tools they need to turn their lives around. So it's a different approach. It takes a very coordinated approach, and that's where bringing in professionals, those folks who have helped do this in other cities, is going to be very important to the success of bringing it here to St. Louis.
So Jimmy Edwards has been public safety director for Mayor Cruson. Would you keep him on as you pursue this plan?
I have to say, I've known Judge Edwards for so many years. I was a volunteer at the Juvenile Detention Center for almost a decade, and came to admire his work there. I do think that we've had a lot of missed opportunities here with regards to public safety, and I think it's time that we take a different direction. Whether Judge Edwards stays on or not is not something I'm prepared to answer right now, but I do think that it's time to have a major shift in how we are approaching public safety in St. Louis.
So the St. Louis Young Democrats, they had said that for their endorsement process, they only wanted to consider people who'd vowed to reject all contributions from the Police Union Political Action Committee. You did agree to that pledge, but what made you decide that this is something that's not welcome for your campaign?
Well, look, I work with our police department. I think it's important that a public safety plan be rooted in mending the relationship between the community and the police department. But I do think that there is a distrust there, and I'm not interested in really serving on the needs of the police department as a first and foremost priority. I think the public has an overwhelming desire to see a change in how we deploy public safety, and I think it's become a hot button topic, and that's a real problem. I am committed to mending that, but on the forefront, I'm just not accepting of those contributions at this time.
What do you think about that phrase, defund the police? Is that something you support?
Well, the term in and of itself has so many meanings, different meanings for different people. And I think for that reason alone, it is a difficult place to start with when you're talking about building consensus. But I think it's important that the real purpose of that discussion be one that we all take part of. The defund the police concept is really rooted in redirecting funds and addressing crime at the root cause. And I am absolutely in favor of that. We have to have a public safety plan that's rooted in trust and serving our citizens. And my 10-point plan does just that. I think, the hiring of social workers that Mayor Cruson put in place, the Cops and Clinicians program, is an excellent example of starting to reorient funding of public safety efforts in a different way. And if I'm elected mayor, I will take that program, expand on it, and implement other strategies like a 311 system that can reroute some of those non-emergency phone calls to folks outside of traditional law enforcement to better serve our residents.
You mentioned 311. You've also been talking about the 911 problem in this city for a long time. People call 911, they don't get an answer, they get a busy signal. This is something it sounds like you've heard about a lot as an older woman.
Sarah, I've not just heard about it. I have experienced it so many times. The fact that our 911 system of answering emergency calls doesn't function well is devastating. I mean, when you're hearing gunfire in front of your house, you see somebody in distress, experiencing a drug overdose or something like that, and you are calling for an emergency and you get a recording, it's absolutely devastating. It's happened to me time and time again, and it's a real breakdown in trust. We know that we have communities that do not trust our police department, and when they are engaging or willing to share vital information with our police department, the first thing we need to do at the very least is pick up the phone, and we're not doing that. So if elected as mayor, fixing 911 will be a key strategy for rebuilding that trust, and putting in a comprehensive 911 answering system that includes technology and overflow so that no call goes unanswered. We know that 25% of all 911 calls right now are being answered by a recording. It doesn't allow somebody to leave very vital information, somebody who may be witnessing illegal or dangerous activity, to give that information, red shirt, green hat, et cetera, that can leave your mind in a very high stress situation immediately. We need to be able to capture that information, and we need to be able to take the very vital information that folks need to give to our police department in times of distress.
We're talking today to St. Louis Alderwoman Cara Spencer. This is part of a series of interviews with all 4 mayoral candidates. We want to remind you the primary is March 2nd. That is coming up fast. We do need to take a quick break, but we'll be back shortly to continue this conversation. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.
And now back to our conversation. We're talking today to St. Louis Alderwoman Cara Spencer. She's running for mayor, and this interview is part of a 4-day series of one-on-one interviews with the 4 candidates. You can find podcasts of our interviews with Andrew Jones and Tashara Jones on our website or wherever you get your podcasts. And tomorrow we will talk to Aldermanic President Lewis Reed. Cara, we did have a question that came in on our Facebook page. Philip writes, several studies have found that a lack of financial resources and a lack of meaningful employment are just some of the factors that lead to crime in urban areas. What is your plan to bring jobs to the city, and how do we ensure that those jobs go to the residents who need them the most?
Oh, Philip's absolutely right. I mean, having a robust economy is going to be key to ending the sort of cycle of violence. But we have to start ticking that down. If we're going to be serious about, recruiting employers to St. Louis, we have to show the employers nationally that we are serious about addressing violence. So we have to be able to walk and chew gum here, Sarah. So starting to really address some of those structural issues is going to be key to really recruiting jobs. How we're going to make sure that they get in the hands of people who need them. It's the city's responsibility here to make sure that we are providing a workforce that's prepared, and that's why my education plan really focuses on our St. Louis public school kids. These are our lifelong residents here in the city of St. Louis, and making sure that we have a qualified workforce and those kids are prepared to enter and be successful in life.
So you mentioned schools there. The superintendent of schools for the St. Louis Public Schools, he said he would like to see a moratorium on new charters opening in the city within the district's borders. Are you in favor of that?
I am. When we took a look at the proposed closure, which started out at 11 schools, it was devastating. This is totally devastating to families and communities. And so I sat down with Dr. Adams and the elected school board. I am the only mayoral candidate to have done that, to really hear what is it that the city of St. Louis, the administration, needs to do to support our public school kids, who, by the way, make up the the majority of kids in our school in our city. And when Dr. Adams made it very clear that we need to have a plan to educate all of our kids before opening another school, I committed to that, and I remain committed to doing just that, having a convening of stakeholders to look at education holistically across the different types of schools that kids are currently enrolled in.
You've called for the city to offer special education through a separately funded special school district. Why not just join the county's existing special school district?
Oh, we can. I mean, those are not mutually exclusive ideas, Sarah.
Okay.
The concept really here is to make sure that we have the funding to provide for the needs of our children who have additional needs beyond traditional learning. And that's important not just for the kids who do have special needs, and the city of St. Louis does have a fair number of our children who do, but it's really as well to support those children who don't, making sure that we have the mechanism and the funding to address those outside of the traditional classroom will ensure that all kids have the education they need to be successful. And the teachers are not tasked with addressing the needs of children for whom they don't have proper training to do that. That's been an enormous problem for our public school teachers and their students.
So we talked earlier about one of your bigger successes, which involved the effort that you were a part of that ended up stopping or at least pausing airport privatization. I know you feel this thing is not dead yet, but let's talk about something that's a failure. You tried to stop the city from funding renovations to Enterprise Center, where the Blues play. You fought tooth and nail, and that $64 million package went through. You even filed a lawsuit after it went through, saying that the city had acted in a way it couldn't act. You ultimately dropped that lawsuit. Do you have any regrets about how all that went down?
I don't. I mean, the conversation really was around the funding of upgrades to a sports facility that, everybody loves the Blues. I do as well. I mean, they're great for the bottom line. They're great for morale. But the reality is that 60 some odd million bonds out to be $108 million. We obligated ourselves for 30 years to pay for upgrades to a facility that we don't own. And I viewed that as an egregious abuse of tax dollars. The folks who brought that before us were, not forthcoming in the original agreements, and there were some real discrepancies there. And I do not think that the city of St. Louis or any municipality should be responsible alone for investing in a facility that serves the broader region. I think we should have been in discussions with St. Louis County and those fans who use and enjoy the facility, and frankly get a subsidy on that enjoyment on the backs of city taxpayers. And I'm not to say that we shouldn't come to the table with something, but the fact that we failed to negotiate on our own behalf, and now you're seeing the city forking over millions of dollars when we're barely able to make ends meet, and this is going to have a negative impact on the rest of the residents.
So if you're elected mayor, you're going to have to deal with board president Louis Reed. He's one of your opponents in this race. He was on the opposite side of you on that Enterprise Center deal. Mm-hmm. He was also on the opposite side when it came to the airport. Do you think you can work together with him?
Sure. I mean, look, I've worked together with President Reed on lots of issues beyond the ones we've disagreed with. I take that same approach to my fellow aldermen. We often disagree on something like ward reduction, for example, but I've been able to get an enormous amount of legislative issues through the Board of Aldermen because I am able to parse out the personality and the issue. And that's important here. We have got to have a mayor who can get along with the Board of Aldermen, knows how to get policies through, and can be effective at working with people with whom you may not always agree. And that is going to be important, not just with the Board of Aldermen, but the entire region and the state of Missouri, who's frankly of a different political party than the vast majority of St. Louis residents. So there's no doubt about it. We're going to have to get along. I am prepared to do just that.
So you are a native of South City, and you've only represented the South Side on the Board of Aldermen. That's how it works. You couldn't have a district on the North Side. You live in the South Side. But what makes you think that you can represent the North Side as mayor?
Well, Sarah, I do live on the South Side here now, but I bought my first house north of the Del Mar Divide, and I lived there for many, many years.
What neighborhood were you in when you lived?
I was in, sure. Well, the Del Mar Divide sort of switches to the Olive Divide in University City, but I was in University City, north of Olive, and I was certainly the minority in my neighborhood, and I represent right now a very, very diverse part of St. Louis, and it's a beautiful part of St. Louis. We definitely have our challenges, and my neighborhoods here in South St. Louis look a lot like many North Side neighborhoods, and I recognize the needs. I have real experience in addressing them and turning around some of our most challenged neighborhoods. And I'm going to take that same approach citywide if elected as our mayor.
So there has been a lot of chatter. This is a Twitter type conversation, but there's been a lot of talk on social media that if you're a true progressive, you need to support the black woman running in this race. What's your reaction to that as the white woman in this race?
Sure. I mean, I think that race is the elephant in every conversation. With Proposition D, I think we should be talking about policies, and I am happy to have that discussion. I mean, I think, while race in addressing issues, decades of racism in St. Louis is a key to moving our community forward. I think I have a track record of addressing the needs of St. Louisans, and I look forward to earning the trust of every community and members throughout the city of St. Louis if I'm elected.
So I'm curious to hear just a little bit about your background. I understand you grew up in the city. What was your background of your family there?
Sure. Well, I'm not your typical candidate for mayor in that regard. I mean, I don't have a political background. My parents were not in elected office, and neither was I. I am the first in my family to get a college degree. I paid my way through school slinging burgers in northern Missouri, and I got a degree in mathematics. I worked in the field of analytics and consulting for about a decade and a half before deciding to run for office. I was the oldest of three kids. My younger sister died tragically when she was in high school. She became an organ donor, and that is a path that has been very healing for my family personally. And I have a younger brother who's a good decade younger than me, so that's sort of my background, Sarah. I never pictured myself in elected office, but seeing a disconnect between the community I live in and the representative, and seeing the only free public pool, the largest asset for families down here, closed by the city, it propelled me to take real action. And I decided to run for office to fix some of that. That was 2015. I thought, well, maybe I'll just keep my old job and do this on the side. And I have to tell you, I absolutely love public service. I love these fights. I fight for the people, regular people, every day. And I've had some great successes doing it. Of course, you mentioned one of my issues we did not win, but I don't regret that for a minute. It helped turn around the conversation about how we fund stadiums, how we fund public assets, and where our money can and should go. And as we look forward at a very, very tough set of budget years ahead, we're going to look at that decision with new scrutiny. And as we dole out those millions of dollars of taxpayer money, we're going to look at that decision as one that may not be, I believe, in the best interest of our citizens, our city, as our community as a whole.
So really, you owe your political career to the city closing Marquette Pool. Is that what this all comes down to?
I mean, it really does. And to look at this, you look at this pool, it's not just any pool, Sarah. It's an Olympic-sized pool that was built in the heyday of St. Louis, and it was closed for almost no reason. It had a bad pump and needed some real structural work. And it needed commitment to figuring out how to do that. And that's exactly what I brought to the table when I was elected. And now that pool serves as a reminder of not just what our neighborhoods used to be, but what they can be if we lead with our citizens' best interests at the heart of our decisions, and we really put serving our communities first.
So I'm going to ask you three questions here, and I'm looking for brevity because we have just a few minutes left here, if that even. First question is, what is the best thing about St. Louis?
Oh, there's no one best thing about St.
You
Louis,
gotta
Sarah.
pick
You know
one.
that.
Come on
I'll say our culture, jazz, the blues, our artists, our creative community. People who
I don't know that that's one thing, but okay, culture. I'll accept
I'll say the creative community of St. Louis.
There you go. Okay. What's the worst thing about St. Louis?
The worst thing, racism. Our history of overt and structural racism. The racial covenants got started here. We segregated our own city, and that has resulted in not just physical distance, but real life expectancy. We did that. We perpetuated that, and it's our job as a city to fix it.
So if you could sign an executive order on day one that would make one simple policy change, what would it be?
Oh, I'm going to assume that we get an equitable distribution of the vaccine underway here, and I'm trusting that Dr. Eccles and others are working on that as we speak. So given that, I would say taking the guns out of hands of our children, not to punish them, but to prevent them from being involved in violence. I had a gun put to my own head by a young man who was a child, and it was terrifying for me, but I'm, still here. And that boy, he lost his life that day to incarceration. So getting the guns out of the hands of our kids would be number one for me.
So our very last question for you, and I'm going to ask you to keep this to the short version. I know there's a good long version here too, but why should people take a chance on you?
Well, I think people should trust me, and that's it. Asking people to vote for me as mayor is asking them to trust. It's time for a change. It's time to change course, St. Louis. I'm bullish on our future. I know that we are going to grow over the next few years if I'm elected as mayor. There's no doubt about it. We have a federal government coming to the table to support cities like we haven't seen in years. We are going to bring down violence through smart, data-driven programs that we can put to work right away. We should be laying the groundwork of what St. Louis should look like, a growing and thriving community. And if I'm elected mayor, I'm going to serve not just on the right side of issues, but with the same dogged, relentless determination that I brought to the airport privatization discussion, and with a relentless commitment to our citizens and the future, a brighter future for St. Louis and the entire St. Louis region.
Well, Alderwoman Cara Spencer, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Sarah. Enjoy this beautiful day out.
I fully intend to do that. It does look amazing out there.
And it really does.
We want to let you know you can find more information at caraspencer4mayor.com. That's the numeral 4. And also check out our interviews from Monday and Tuesday with Andrew Jones and Tashara Jones. The podcasts of those interviews are on our website or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also be able to find Louis Reeds after we sit down with him tomorrow. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU. If you learned something new from today's episode, consider leaving us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the easiest way to help people discover our show. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.